We have an untrustworthy society. You can't really depend on your neighbors and even strangers like you used to. I mean, I know.
We also don't know our neighbors.
I don't know my neighbors at all.
I don't know the person living next to me at my apartment.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you their name, you know, and that is a sign of societal decay, that we don't know what's going on in our immediate surroundings. We don't have that trust built up with people. And so we can't trust that they're going to help us out, or that video that they're taking is not going to get clipped by them out of context to frame us as the villain. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Undoctrination. I'm Maggie.
And I'm Olivia.
And this week, we're going to talk about what you should do if you see someone getting beaten up in public. Not necessarily, but we're going to be talking about the bystander effect, because multiple videos and cases have been going viral with people either intervening in a violent crime and then getting arrested for it, or a violent crime taking place and nobody doing anything about it, just walking by, minding their business, even though, you know, it's women being beaten on the street. So the reason we kind of thought about this episode was because there's a video that's been spread around the interwebs, and we'll link the source of this, of two really like skinny, weak women just getting absolutely pounded on by two very strong men, and people just kind of walking by, not doing anything about it. And my first thought has always been, those are women who clearly can't defend themselves. One, why are people beating them? That's crazy. We know not to beat women. But two, why is no one stepping in? And Olivia, I think you've seen some of the responses to that question. And a lot of the times it's men saying they're scared of being punished by the legal system if they do step in.
Yeah, and I think this conversation of ethics is really important to have, because there are two sides to it. Because one of the major stories we saw this year was Daniel Penny, who is a former Marine. Personally, I believe he was completely well-meaning in his actions, but on the New York City subway, his actions and taking a man who was making threats, he was bothering people, women and children were literally cowering. I read the motion to dismiss submitted by his lawyers and also watched video footage from this event. Women and children are literally cowering from this guy who's saying, I don't care if I go to jail today. I'm okay with going to jail today. And he's walking around threatening, harassing people. And so Daniel Penny, former Marine, uses his training and sinks him to the floor in a chokehold. Unfortunately, the man passed away. And now he is being strung by a lynch mob in front of the media and by the New York district attorney, who is liberal. And meanwhile, you know, hundreds and thousands of actual violent criminals go free every day in New York. So it's just kind of one of those things where, is it even worth it to step in? Because this guy subdued an attacker who was, I mean, almost without a doubt going to inflict some harm, because he was already throwing trash and I believe had thrown his jacket at people on the train. So he was, I mean, a few moments away from inflicting some serious harm, and he died. And the medical examiner actually has come under fire for not being able to 100% determine if the asphyxiation was the actual cause of death. So it's just one of those things where they're going to charge you anyways. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you actually caused the death or not. Nobody cares in this liberal city. And a lot of it, I think, is racially charged, because the ex-Marine is a white guy. The homeless guy on the train was a black guy. And a lot of men, a lot of conservative men, a lot of right-leaning and white or Caucasian American guys are thinking, what's the point of me even stepping in if I'm going to be treated like this? So I definitely see both sides to the argument, but there is a certain discourse that surrounds these types of videos. So in the one that you mentioned before, were these two women who I believe happened to be white, and the men that were attacking happened to be black. The discourse surrounding that was I think a lot of white conservative men feeling like, well, why should I step in? White women voted for this, basically. Or why should I step in if I'm going to be strung by a lynch mob?
Which is really a strange assumption to make about the women in that video. Like, you have no idea how they voted. And let's be real, they might not have even voted to begin with, right? But even if they had voted liberal or left wing, that doesn't really matter, right? Sometimes it takes people coming face to face with reality to change their opinions on things. But I do understand the other point that what happens if they do step in and then people reframe the narrative to suggest that they're not a hero, they're not the savior of these women, but instead they're the aggressor, they're the bad guy here. And I do think that is a very reasonable threat, actually, because we've seen it multiple times in the past few years. Men being like blown up to such big proportions where they become the center of a national debate. Kyle Rittenhouse is a really famous example of someone who was just a kid defending himself. It, like, the courts ruled that it was self-defense. It was him standing his ground, right? And warding off violent attackers. And yet this child who, you know, hadn't even gone to college yet, I don't think, became the center of a national debate. And now the rest of his life, he is an instantly recognizable figure for probably what was one of the most traumatic events of his life as well. So that is a real threat. And it does suggest that maybe we should shift the national conversation around this, because as a woman, I want people to step up and defend me if they see me being hurt in public. I know that I am not very strong. I do try to exercise, but I'm not going to be in the gym pumping iron. And even if I was, there's a high likelihood that I wouldn't be able to ward off a potential attacker, especially if it's a man. So I do want the safety of other men to come in and protect me if something's happening. But at this point, I can't really expect it. And also, there's this other strange thing happening where instead of people defending others in these really scary, threatening situations, they just take out their phone and film it.
That's the other thing, yeah.
I can't tell if that's a good or bad thing. I think it's just the most natural response at this point. And I kind of wanted to get into this first before talking about legality of things. I do think in most cases you are protected by the legal system if you do choose to enter that situation and protect a woman. But that doesn't stop the whole of American society and maybe even the world from judging you and seeing an out of context thing happening because everyone is catching all of it on video. Like, that's the norm now. The bystander effect is something most people have learned about in psychology classes, maybe in high school. But for those of you who are unfamiliar, the bystander effect refers to people's tendency to not intervene when witnessing something crazy happening or a violent crime taking place. And it was coined in 1964 after this woman, Kenny Genovese, was murdered outside of her apartment in the street in New York City. She was 28 years old. There were plenty of neighbors around who could have intervened or called the police, but they didn't. And so these two psychologists, Bibb Latané and John Darley, coined the term after, you know, this incident piqued their interest. And there's two factors that go into how you respond to something happening in your immediate surroundings. One is the diffusion of responsibility. So typically when something's happening that people should intervene to stop, the more people that are around, the less likely you are as an individual to intervene, which is kind of crazy. You would think there's safety in numbers, but no. Because there are so many people, your immediate thought is, well, there's all these other people who can step in to intervene. And if someone could intervene, they probably would, right? But everyone's thinking that. The other thing is social influence. So typically, the times when people do intervene, it's because one person broke and like went towards the problem and other people followed suit. There's this social influence to go in and stop things from happening. The other thing I think related to that social influence is the phones, because you see other people take out their phones to film something, and that's like our natural thing to do now. You take out your phone to film instead of stopping whatever is happening. So I don't judge people that are on the train, although I probably have in the past. But I kind of understand why that is like someone's immediate response. Because also there's this freezing effect that occurs because you're scared. You don't know what may happen to you if you try to step in. At least that's my thought. There's no way I'm stepping in a violent crime because I'll die. So
Yes, I'll die.
I may call the police, but I can't physically step in. I will die.
That is valid. And I wish that people were ripping out their phones of their pockets to call the police instead of just opening up the camera app and to record. But I think that this whole problem is very indicative of societal decay. We don't have a high trust society. We have a very low trust society. Unless you're going to a small town or maybe certain suburbs, you're really not going to get the response you're wanting unless like some hero named Daniel Penny comes out or a similar, archetype, and they may or may not be strung through the coals because of it. And it's really, really unfortunate. But I think that's just the case of we have an untrustworthy society. You can't really depend on your neighbors and even strangers like you used to. I mean, I know.
We also don't know our neighbors.
I don't know my neighbors at all.
I don't know the person living next to me at my apartment.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you their name, and that is a sign of societal decay, that we don't know what's going on in our immediate surroundings. We don't have that trust built up with people. And so we can't trust that they're going to help us out, or that video that they're taking is not going to get clipped by them out of context to frame us as the villain. I don't know that there's necessarily an easy way to solve this. I think a lot of times in these conversations that happen on the national stage, I typically do side with more conservative people because they tend to want to look at the entire situation and see what's really going on. And as much as I'm not a pro-violence person, sometimes it is justified in the name of self-defense. And we'll get into the laws around that. But first, I wanted to tell a story about my own bystander effect situation. When I was in college, I lived in this like pretty rough neighborhood. And one night I was outside when a truck drove really, really fast into a light pole, like maybe a few houses down from my house. And my immediate response when I heard the crack of the light pole, which was split in half, not this way, but this way, my immediate response was I got up, I saw what happened, and then my body just froze. And when you're in a situation like that, your body does freeze, like that fear response does take over. Even if it's only for a few seconds, it feels like eternity. And that's not necessarily something you can remove from your system, but you can override it. So I ran to the car, and pretty much my entire neighborhood ran to, not the car, the truck. And it was a really, really awful scene, really gruesome car accident, very traumatizing. I'm glad I did run though, because I assume it was helpful in some way, and same for everyone else. But the fact that everyone ran, that meant that was because we all knew each other. We had a high trust neighborhood, or at least knew each other's names. And because other people saw people running, they felt comfortable running to the scene of the accident as well. But I assume everyone else in that situation had the same freeze as I did, and it does feel like eternity. But it is something you can override. So, the bystander effect doesn't always apply. You don't have to be a victim of your psychology. You can run towards the problem, but it is scary. Don't feel ashamed if your first response is to freeze up when something crazy happens. It typically kind of knocks you out of whatever you were doing before and sends like a shock to the system. Either way, there are some legal concerns I assume that people have when trying to confront these crimes that are taking place. That's another reason why people freeze, is because they don't feel they have enough information to assess what will happen to them if they do respond. One good thing to note is that you should probably look up what the laws are in your jurisdiction. Not that you're going to encounter a violent crime at some point in your life, just to know in the back of your head, yes, God willing, hope you don't encounter a violent crime, just to know what the legality around these situations are, because it depends on your jurisdiction. And, federalism is great. I like that we have, different laws in different places, but sometimes it can lead to really confusing standards for different states.
It's funny that I guess it's interesting to hear your perspective on how you almost like freeze or like your heart stops when something like that occurs, and then the bystanders all come together because you have that kind of neighborhood familiarity. Because I almost had like the exact opposite experience when I had a kind of scary experience when I was in high school. And I think I've told you about this personally before. I don't think I've said it on the podcast before, but I was on this trip to Canada when I was on the Olympic development team with Team USA Wrestling. And so it was Team USA, Team Canada, a bunch of college girls, and there was also Team Japan there. The Japan girls were, I can't even say if they were in high school. Maybe they were like 14, 15, but they were younger than the rest of us. And they were there for this training camp and then for like this tournament the day after. But this all took place over Christmas break. So we are in downtown Vancouver as a bunch of teenagers with like one chaperone on New Year's Eve. This is how the story starts.
Uh-oh.
It's just chaotic. Me, this other girl from Team USA, and like 3 Japanese girls get separated from the group. Me and the girl from Team USA were both like basically the heavyweights on the team. So we're significantly taller and bigger than the little Japanese girls who were like a foot smaller than us. They don't speak a lick of English, by the way. They're kind of trailing behind us because we literally can't converse, but we're just walking through these huge crowds of people in downtown Vancouver trying to find our coach and trying to find the rest of our group. I hear like a scuffle happening behind me, and there's like fireworks going off. There's live music in the streets. So it kind of keeps going for like a few seconds until I realize that it's the Japanese girls behind me. I turn around and they're being accosted by these 3 grown men, guys in their late 20s, early 30s. They're speaking in, I would say, Latin American accents. And they said they were grabbing 2 of the girls by the shoulder and they look frightened. And they're like, no. Like they don't even speak English. These guys barely speak English. They're like, oh, we take you back to Brazil. We're from Brazil. And they were trying to get them to come back to, I assume, their hotel. And then they were talking about taking them to Brazil. And they were laughing with each other about how these little girls don't understand what they're saying. And they're like, we're going to take them back to Brazil. Having this conversation in public and open, but it's just so chaotic around that nobody really understands what's going on.
Yeah.
But in my head, like looking back on it, I probably could have frozen, but I literally started, my adrenaline made me just start going off. Like I just started screaming. I was like, no, you're not going to do that. No. And I just said no.
Period.
Over and over again. I start like just yelling at them. They're like, oh, sorry. Like we didn't know you were with her.
You better be sorry.
They ran. And then these little Japanese girls literally start like doing like this little bow thing to me. And then once I got home, I had like all these like Instagram follow requests from like random like Japanese wrestlers who were like, "Thank you." But so that was really crazy.
That's so
that was
Olivia,
really crazy.
I'm so proud of you. That's crazy.
Dude, it was so crazy.
Did you
I was
feel
like,
the freeze?
No. I like it.
No.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like I had the opposite experience because I felt the freeze after, because my adrenaline like kicked in like that as soon as I comprehended what was going on. But then after, I was like, I can't believe that just happened. I need a moment to like collect myself and like look at my whereabouts. And then we eventually found our coach and like went home and stuff like that after.
Oh
but
my
I was
gosh.
it was so traumatizing.
We have to travel together. I would feel so safe traveling with you.
I feel like I am a safe person because anytime I've been like accosted in public, I'm like, you know who you're talking to, right? But they never do. But I just, all that to say is that it's interesting that I had like the frozen reaction like afterwards.
After
I don't know
the
what
fact.
to make of that. But I think when the time
that's
gets
crazy.
going, or like,
Oh
I
my
guess
gosh.
when the
I'm
times
so
get
glad you were
going, the
there
going
to
get tough.
protect
You know what I'm
them.
saying? So I feel like I had to do what I had to do, but that was scary. And I don't think that area, at least in downtown Vancouver, would necessarily be considered like a high trust society at all. That's probably why they thought it was okay to do that around all those people, because just for context, this is New Year's Eve. Many people around me aren't speaking English. There's a heavy Asian population in Vancouver, and Indian and Middle Eastern. So there's all these different languages around me. No Americans around me besides the one friend I was with who was just stunned. She had the kind of frozen reaction, which no fault to her. We were 16 years old and the girls were like 14 years old and these guys were twice her age. But it was, I think, a low trust instance where they thought that nobody cares about these little Japanese girls who don't look like they're here with any adult. Let's just take them, basically. And that crap happens.
That is so horrifying. Goodness gracious. Well, thank God for Olivia Rondeau to step in and help. But for real, now I'm like, okay, Olivia, we have to go on all of the trips together.
Yeah, why don't you take me on your international trips and missions and escapades? What the heck?
Yeah, we should go on a double date trip. That would be fun.
Okay, yeah.
By the way, guys, as of filming this podcast, I think this is getting released the day I leave for Argentina. I'm so excited to be going back. It'll be good. Either way, I did want to get into the legalities of stepping in and stopping a crime with deadly force, because sometimes that has to happen too, as in the case of Daniel Penny, right? And one thing I wanted to say about it is that you absolutely should figure out what the laws are in your jurisdiction. So in your state, in the area within your state. Just because, not that you're planning to go intervene like Superman or a cowboy and do some vigilante justice or anything. Don't do that, okay? You're not Superman. But you should know, just in case you're ever confronted with a situation where you do have to defend yourself or someone else, figure out what the laws are. Because some states are stand your ground where, you know, you're allowed to defend yourself and your property with deadly force without having to prove that you tried to run away. But there are some states where you have to prove that you tried to retreat. It's called duty to retreat, which means in the situation where someone's trying to come at you with deadly force, you have to be able to prove that you like at least tried to get away or there was no way to get away from the threat. I personally don't think the duty to retreat law makes any sense, because how are you going to be able to prove that? In my opinion, like, I don't know how legally you can prove that you tried to get away or that there was no way you could get away. Also, how are we going to judge the responses of someone who's being attacked in a deadly way? I don't get it. That's just me personally.
Well, a judge will do that because judges judge. It's unfortunate that happens, but yeah, it's true that there are certain states and there's certain cases where it's so insane because prosecutors and the judge are literally like, well, you should have locked yourself in the closet. Oh, he already broke down the closet? Well, you should have locked yourself in the other closet before shooting him. Like, it's actually ridiculous.
Lock yourself in the icebox. Like, what do you mean?
But there are certain cases where people just take it too far. The one that's going viral this week I've seen on X/Twitter is this guy in Panama who, and we've talked about these eco-fascist protesters and stuff like that before, but these guys
who are very annoying,
who
might I
are
add.
very
disruptive.
Very, very disruptive. So as they typically do, these protesters in Panama were caused a traffic jam due to a blockade of demonstrators on the Pan American Highway, about 50 miles west of Panama City, which is the country's capital. And if you know anything about the Pan American Highway, which I didn't until today, you know it's like the longest. It's the world's largest motorable route. So it stretches from Alaska to Argentina.
Oh, is it Route 40?
It's just called the Pan American Highway, but maybe it has another name.
Okay.
But yeah, I
think I've been on it.
Argentina expert. But so just for context, these people are blocking the world's longest road, essentially the world's longest highway. So think about how many people are stuck on the other side of the blockade.
Gosh.
So of course it's an American guy, right? An expat who is now in Panama, 77-year-old retired lawyer, Kenneth Darlington.
Should know the law.
Yeah, who should know the law probably, but he gets out of his car and shoots dead 2 protesters in the street.
No.
Yeah.
And you were telling me there were a lot of people on Twitter being like, this is an American hero.
Dude, people were praising this guy.
This is a situation where I probably don't agree with whatever like the right-leaning people are saying. You should not shoot the protester. I'm not claiming that's every conservative's opinion, by the way. But even though the protests are annoying and very inconvenient, and I do think maybe moving them, I wouldn't judge.
I think we should drag them out of the street by their hair, by their toe, by their ear, anything.
I don't know the legalities around that, but I wouldn't personally judge you if you were like, nope, like drag them out of the road. But, you know, maybe don't respond with deadly force to someone who's not trying to kill you. This seems pretty straightforward. I don't know why we're celebrating this guy. That's an insane overreaction to what was taking place.
So
is that controversial to say that was an overreaction? It
probably is because people are so angry about these protesters, which I am too. I personally haven't been affected, but these roadblocks, and this is the source is Fox News where I'm getting this article from, but the roadblocks have caused up to $80 million in daily business losses and have shuttered schools nationwide for more than a week. So this protest had been going on for a while. It was over a Canadian company getting a contract to mine copper.
Not copper mines.
So these protesters decided to cause millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars of loss and ruin people's school days and possibly stop ambulances from getting to a hospital, possibly stop people from getting a job, missing a job interview, all that kind of stuff. So I really
say jail time might be fair for the protesters who do that.
They need to
significant loss of income. If you're causing significant loss of income and not letting emergency vehicles
they should get
through
sued. They should go to jail.
Yeah, I'm usually not a throw 'em in jail kind of person either, but like that sounds like
throw the book
going a bit too far. Also, aside from just Googling stand your ground laws, also make sure you keep a spare what are those like
gun.
Big microphone things?
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about?
A megaphone?
Keep one of those in your car so that you can shout at protesters who block you on the street.
I do like that.
That's probably a better release of anger than shooting them. you know?
Yeah.
We don't bring a gun to a word fight, if that makes sense. Like,
don't bring your butt onto the highway though. I don't understand that. I get that their goal is to cause a lot of financial loss and to disrupt people's days. Congratulations, you accomplished it. Now 2 of you are dead. Not saying it's right, but I understand why the guy was so mad, because I don't know if he was trying to go to a doctor's appointment or what, but because of his age, authorities are, or I guess like people are kind of speculating that Panamanian authorities are not going to keep him in custody for a super long time. If he's convicted, he might get something like house arrest or probation.
That is a thing in other countries. I know, I'm pretty sure in Argentina, this is off the cuff, we can Google it later.
She loves talking about Argentina.
In Argentina, if you're over a certain age, you're not going to be thrown in jail with the rest of the criminal population. You're getting house arrest, you know? Which I kind of like that law, but at the same time,
depends what you do.
Murderous grandpas, you know, I think we can lock them up, you know?
Yeah.
Never thought I'd be saying lock them up on a podcast, but you know.
You're such a bad libertarian.
Yeah, I know. But if they violate the non-aggression principle, sorry.
Question though.
It's jail time.
Question. This actually just piqued my interest. So is it violating the non-aggression principle for protesters to put up a road blockade?
I personally think so.
Why?
Because they're restricting your movement and your ability to go get money, basically.
So are you allowed to use
imprisonment?
Right. So
not to get all like, ooh, is it false imprisonment to do a roadblock where people can't escape and are trapped on a roadway? Probably not legally, but in my opinion, when you restrict a person's movement like that, you are violating their rights.
Yeah.
So
in that case, it may be appropriate to use physical removal, like grab them and move them off the street, but not shoot them.
Potentially, yeah. We should get a nap expert on here.
Dang, who should we talk to? Who should we talk to?
I don't know. But that is a great question, Olivia. I personally think it does violate your rights.
I agree. And maybe not from a legal standpoint, is this false imprisonment? I have no idea. But from a philosophical, like libertarian worldview.
I guess it's not false imprisonment. You can get out of your car and walk away. But
it is restricting.
To me,
it is
restricting your movement. So I don't know. I do think they should go to jail, but that might be a controversial thing to say on a libertarian podcast.
Really? I think libertarians, I mean, I get the whole thing. Oh, it's a public road. We should just build our private roads anyways. Wah, wah, wah. Well, our taxes paid for the road, so we should have the right to go on the road. And if there's people blocking the road, then that's wrong. That's bad stuff. And whenever I see videos of people doing it and they get beaten up and dragged off the street, I'm honestly like shedding tears of joy. I'm not saying that they should be like seriously injured or shot or killed or anything like that. I don't agree with that. But there is one video I saw that really excited me because the guy gets out of his car and he picks the guy up by like the foot and flings him off the road, comes back and starts dragging more and more protesters off the road. And they're like, stop! How are you doing this? Why are you doing this to me? Ma'am, you're blocking the road. You're blocking the road, ma'am.
Sorry.
Sorrows.
I gotta get to work. I'm gonna be late.
Thoughts and prayers.
What about people on parole who need to go see their parole officer?
Womp.
Like, y'all aren't thinking of other people. It's not compassion or kindness that you're employing when you sit in the freaking road and block people's movement. I'm sorry, you're a bad person. No, maybe not a bad person. That's a bad thing to do.
No, you're a bad person.
It's a bad thing to do.
You're a bad person, and I hate you.
People do bad things sometimes, but that's a bad thing to do. Anyways, this has been a great conversation.
We're philosophers.
I wanted to get into feminism. I know that seems like a total deviation, but I wanted to get a little bit into feminism because some men were saying, well, women want equality. So like, you know, if you want to be treated as an equal, you shouldn't expect us to defend you. And I think that's baloney,
Yeah.
personally. Okay. My feminism doesn't work that way. But what I wanted to say about feminism, random tangent before we end this podcast. I've had this thought recently. Feminism doesn't mean anything. It's a useless term at this point. You cannot, if I say I'm a feminist, you could not accurately describe my beliefs if you knew nothing else about me.
It literally says nothing.
In fact, most of what you would say if I said I was a feminist would be the exact opposite of what I believe. So I don't know. I'm tired of the feminism talking points like, oh, well, they're probably feminist, like we shouldn't go and defend them. Okay, no. That's not what we believe, okay?
Right. And it's funny because a lot of the one of the major feminist movements today is the one that's trying to get biological males out of women's sports. And it's built off of the acknowledgement of the medical biological fact that men are stronger than women. So a lot of feminists will happily acknowledge that and will say, we don't want to get beat up by men. You guys are stronger than us. Get out of our sports. So you really can't just paint all young white women or paint all women in general with a broad brush saying, oh, well, they think they're equal and as big and as strong as men. No, we don't, sweetie. No. And I'm sorry your mom hurt your feelings or something like that. But that's not what we believe. If you see grown men slapping and beating on a woman for no reason in public and your reaction to that is to say, ha ha, feminist, then I think I don't wish violence against anybody. But if you got beat up, then I really hope that somebody would help you. I really hope that somebody would help you. That's all I'll say. Yeah.
Period. Anyways, this has been a great episode. Please send prayers for a safe flight.
Thoughts
I'm
and
very
prayers.
excited, but I get nervous doing international flights. I really do. I say like several Hail Marys and many, many prayers. But next time we see you, it will not be me calling in from Argentina. We'll film another episode as a treat for you guys while I'm over there. But I can't wait to come back and tell you guys everything about the election because I will be there during the election day between Javier Milei and Sergio Massa. Oh. So I will give you guys all the insight. Don't you even worry. Yeah. Anyways.
They're waiting on their toes for that one.
I bet you are. I bet you are. Waiting with anticipation. Great. Well, Olivia, do you have any final thoughts or social media channels you want to plug?
Bystander effect, bad. Low trust societies, bad. Helping people in need, good. Stand your ground law is good. Those are my final thoughts. You guys can find me on, as usual, right? Also, shout out to Team Japan. I still remember you guys. I hope you guys still remember me. That was a scary experience that we experienced together. So you guys can follow me on Twitter at Rondeau Olivia. Oh, sorry, X. At Rondeau Olivia and Instagram at Rondeau.Olivia. And where can we find you, Miss Maggie?
You can find me on Twitter, X, at Liberty Anders. I have no more final thoughts. You guys have heard enough of my thoughts for today.
All right,
I will see you guys next week. Please leave us some comments. Tell us what's up, what you're thinking, what you're doing, your hopes, your dreams. All right. Have an amazing week. Bye, guys.
Bye.